Hey guys, tonight we drift back in time to a quiet twilight in ancient Gaul, where campfires flicker gently beneath the stars and distant horns echo softly across grassy hills. Let's take a walk through a Roman general's world, not one of war or conquest, but of lantern light, old scrolls, quiet reflections, and the hush before dawn. You'll find Julius Caesar not on horseback or in battle formation, but seated beside a small flame, with wax tablets in hand and the wind rushing past tall grass. Honestly, if you were expecting swords and shouting, you probably wouldn't survive 10 minutes out here with this kind of peace. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind moves low over the Gaulish plain, quiet and steady, carrying with it the last soft light of the day. You walk slowly past canvas tents, each one glowing faintly with the warmth of small fires. The sky above you is brushed in lavender and pale rose, the final colors of twilight stretching over the hills. A single bright star appears, like a pinprick in deepening fabric. Somewhere nearby, an ox shifts gently in its yoke, unconcerned. The scent of baked barley and olive oil lingers in the cooling air, clinging to worn linen like a memory. You pass a young legionary sitting cross-legged on a flat stone, humming softly as he sharpens a dull blade. He doesn't do it out of urgency more, as a comfort, a habit, the steady hiss of the whetstone, like the sleepy rhythm of a lullaby no one remembers the words to. His hands move slow, deliberate, as if even time is quieter in this hour. At the edge of the encampment, slightly apart from the rest, stands a larger tent. Its canvas is darker, its ropes perfectly taut, its seams reinforced by experience. This is where Caesar sits. He leans over a wooden table, his cloak resting lightly across his shoulders. The folds rise and fall gently with the breeze, the edges brushing against tufts of tall grass. He writes slowly on a wax tablet, his silhouette flickering in the glow of a single oil lamp. His stylus moves with the calm certainty of someone long practiced, each letter carved with care. No flourishes, only clarity. His fingers are stained faintly with wax and ink. On the table lies a half-unrolled scroll, one end held in place by a pale stone. The papyrus whispers in the wind, its curled corners dry like autumn leaves. The words are Greek notes on siegecraft from old Macedonian thinkers. He traces a line with his finger, sips from a cup of warm wine, and returns to his notes without hurry. The wine smells of rosemary and something sweet and earthy. Maybe dates. Maybe figs. You get the sense everything he does here, reading, writing, thinking, follows a pace older than urgency. Just behind him, fireflies drift lazily in the dark like floating lanterns. The night grows thicker, heavier with stillness, but it is not a tense stillness. It feels like ink settling on a page. Somewhere, a Gallic horn sounds in the distance, long and low. Caesar glances toward the sound, then returns to his tablet. Some historians still debate whether these quiet moments revealed his true self, but tonight there's nothing to debate. He is simply still. Somewhere far off, a Gallic horn sounds. Not urgent, not close, just a long, low note drifting across the hills. Caesar glances up briefly, his eyes narrowing at the sound. But then he lowers his head again and writes another line. You realize that he has probably heard that same horn every evening for days now, and it no longer stirs anything urgent in him. It's just part of the landscape, like the stars, or the creak of the table leg beneath his wrist. The Roman general is a man wrapped in stillness, and it fits him the way a good cloak does, not too tight, not too loose. A moth flutters past the flame, looping clumsily, as if it's trying to read over Caesar's shoulder. He pauses, watching it with something close to amusement. Then, almost smiling, he lifts his hand and gently shoos it away. You won't find glory in wax tablets, you imagine him saying, if he were the type to talk to moths. It hovers, uncertain, then flits off into the dusk. You swear it looks disappointed. In the distance, the hills darken to a velvet gray, and the soft silhouettes of trees blend into one another like watercolor strokes that bled a little too far. The hush of the land grows deeper, and the fires across the camp begin to lower their flames, fed less frequently as soldiers settle into their routines. A few murmurs drift through the air, someone laughing at a remembered joke, someone whispering a line from home. The scent of pine smoke settles low, curling around your ankles like a lazy cat. The night has arrived not with ceremony, but with soft confidence. As Caesar lifts his stylus one last time to scratch a short note into the wax, a quiet truth settles in. This moment, like the many before it, will not be remembered by history books. No marble statue will capture this specific hour. But perhaps it is in moments like these, between action and outcome, between horn and hoofprint, that the true story of empires is written, or at least quietly drafted in tidy lines by men who understand the value of stillness. Some historians still debate whether Caesar found peace in these quiet routines or merely used them to sharpen his thoughts. Either way, tonight, he seems more monk than conqueror, and his world, for now, is made not of steel, but of wax, wine, and words. You step softly into the tent, where the fabric breathes gently with the evening breeze. The lamp on Caesar's desk burns low but steady, casting a golden arc across the aged wood. It is a simple desk unvarnished, worn smooth by years of use, with ink stains like old footprints from thoughts long past. Its surface holds the quiet order of a mind that prefers structure. Tablets stacked neatly to one side, a slender blade used for sharpening styluses, a folded cloth with a faint scent of myrrh. Caesar sits with his back straight, though not rigid. His posture has the discipline of a man who doesn't often collapse into chairs, but rather enters them as if in conversation. A thin woolen cloak rests around his shoulders, dark against the pale folds of his tunic. It shifts slightly when he moves, like a curtain stirred by memory. He leans forward now, elbows resting lightly on the desk, a wax tablet before him. The stylus glides slowly across the surface with a soft scraping sound. It is not the writing of urgency, but of attention. To his left sits a small cup of warm honeyed wine, the steam curling up and vanishing into the shadows above. He takes a sip now and then, not for indulgence, but perhaps for the warmth, the familiarity, the way it keeps the chill from his fingers. The wine carries the scent of boiled rosemary, hints of date, and something faintly smoky. You'd guess he has been drinking the same blend for years. Probably hasn't switched vintners since Gaul grew its first grape. The wooden desk creaks slightly when he adjusts his seat. Underneath, the legs are reinforced with leather cords, a repair job done not by a carpenter, but likely a soldier with time to spare and a gift for improvising stability. The legs themselves are uneven from age and campaign travel, so a small wedge of folded parchment has been wedged beneath one. It's the little things that keep an empire from wobbling. Outside, the wind picks up, and the tent walls rustle like papyrus in a scholar's hand. Caesar doesn't look up. His attention remains focused on the tablet, the stylus, the way the light spills across the grain of the wood. He pauses only to warm his hands around the wine, or to glance over at a scroll, unfurled beside him notes from earlier in the day, or perhaps something older, more reflective. The desk is less a piece of furniture and more a companion. It knows more of his thoughts than any man alive. He reaches across the surface and picks up a sealed scroll. The wax seal breaks with a quiet pop, like a grape underfoot. He reads in silence, lips pressed together in faint concentration. Then he tilts his head slightly and exhales through his nose, an expression you might mistake for amusement, or quiet resignation, depending on your mood. You imagine that generals don't laugh loudly in solitude. They reserve it for politics or particularly bad poetry. The wax tablet is nearly full now. With one hand, he slides it aside and brings another into place. Each board is neatly trimmed and slightly bowed from use, with edges that have been polished by travel and time. They stack like wooden memories, ready to be reheated and rewritten, like conversations never quite finished. There's a small jar of ink off to one side. Though wax is his usual medium, ink still plays its part. You notice his fingers ink-stained, slightly rough but precise. These are not hands that merely give commands. They record. They calculate. They draw maps from memory and sketch battle lines with the same care a gardener might give to rows of herbs. You wonder if he ever draws anything else. Perhaps a tree, a cup, a face he no longer names. Beneath the desk lies a pair of worn sandals, kicked off with casual familiarity. His feet rest flat on the woven mat laid over the dirt floor. It's frayed at the edges, probably carried from Rome, and has seen every kind of weather. It smells faintly of cedar and old ink, surprisingly comforting, like an old library with bad lighting and excellent acoustics. The tense silence is companionable, filled only with soft sounds, the occasional creak of wood, the faint scratching of the stylus, the sigh of wind as it shifts the corners of maps and loose papers. Somewhere beyond the canvas, a horse shifts its weight. Farther still, a soldier coughs once and then goes quiet again. This is not the kind of quiet that demands silence. It invites it, like a bench under a fig tree in late summer. From time to time, Caesar leans back slightly, eyes half-lidded, lost in thought. He does not stare off into space. He gazes inward, like a diver preparing to plunge below the surface. His fingers tap gently on the table, each rhythm a thought unspoken. You get the sense he's solving something. Not a problem, necessarily, but a shape of an idea that's almost formed. A circle missing its final curve. As the night deepens, the desk becomes the brightest thing in the tent. Its surface glows in the lamp's flicker, golden and warm. The shadows behind Caesar stretch long, but do not threaten. They are merely waiting, like patient listeners at the edge of a tale. The general dips a cloth in the wine and wipes the stylus clean. A habit or a ritual. Maybe both. You notice now that there's a small mark carved into the desk, near the back right corner. Not decoration, just a groove, as if someone pressed the edge of a blade there once, thinking of something far away. Maybe he did it during a long wait. Maybe he never noticed. But the desk holds it. It holds everything. Some historians still argue whether Caesar preferred the battlefield or the desk, whether his brilliance lay in movement or meditation. But here, at this quiet table, there is no question. The desk is where thought becomes form, where war becomes language, where legacy begins not in blood, but in wax. And to be fair, if desks had egos, this one would probably brag about being the co-author of several conquests. Though, if it ever talked, it might also request a cushion. That stool looks criminally uncomfortable. You step away from the tent as the lamplight softens behind you, and the cool air greets your face with the faintest kiss of dew. The night has deepened, and with it, the quiet has thickened like warm wool pulled over the shoulders. The camp fades behind you, swallowed gently by darkness and distance. Your sandals touch the packed earth path that winds between olive trees, old ones, their twisted trunks shaped like knotted hands reaching toward forgotten stars. The leaves rustle above, silvery and soft, whispering like parchment pages turned by a careful librarian. Moonlight filters through their branches in broken pieces, dappling the ground in shifting patterns that sway with every breeze. You walk slowly. There's no need to hurry. No one hurries here, not even thoughts. The silence isn't empty. It's full of texture, layered like the grain of aged wood or the folds of a woolen cloak forgotten on a warm chair. With each step, the earth crunches gently beneath your feet. The path is uneven, as if it's been walked by too many uncertain boots and not enough contemplative ones. But you walk it now not with conquest, but with presence. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird sings a single note, long and low. Then it falls quiet again, as if even it feels the need to tread lightly among these trees. Up ahead, the olive grove opens to a small rise. Caesar walks there now, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. His cloak hangs quietly down his back, dragging slightly at the hem. He moves not like a soldier or a statesman, but like a man who is used to walking while thinking. You can almost hear the wheels of his mind turning softly, slowly, like a millstone grinding flour by candlelight. He stops near a wide old tree, one so gnarled it seems to lean on itself for support. Caesar lays a hand on the bark, fingers spread like he's reading something written in its lines. Perhaps he is. The tree smells faintly of dry soil and time. He doesn't speak, but he does close his eyes for a moment. Whether in memory or meditation, you can't tell. Either way, it's the kind of silence you don't interrupt. You move around the grove's edge, letting the breeze play with the folds of your tunic. The wind carries the sharp, green scent of crushed olive leaves and something faintly metallic, perhaps the tools left resting on a nearby stone. Someone once tried to prune this grove with Roman geometry, but nature had other plans. The branches bend whichever way they please. If olive trees had personalities, these would probably shrug a lot and make sarcastic remarks about discipline. The moon is higher now, casting light that feels almost deliberate. Each shadow falls into place, as if drawn by a careful hand. Caesar continues his slow circuit, pausing once to listen to something you can't hear. Maybe the breeze, maybe a thought, maybe both. The folds of his cloak ripple lightly behind him, catching the moonlight like silk spun from midnight. There's a low stone bench nearby, its surface smoothed by use. You sit and rest, your hands resting loosely in your lap. The air is cool, but not cold. It hums with quiet energy, like a harp string that has just been plucked and left to vibrate. You inhale deeply. The scent of soil, old bark, distant smoke, and something sweet, maybe lavender, mingles in your breath. For a moment, the world feels very small and very wide all at once. In the distance, a faint rumble like cartwheels fades into nothing. Somewhere, a soldier coughs, then nothing again. The trees sway gently, brushing against each other with the sound of whispers too shy to be heard. Caesar has turned his gaze upward now. He stands beneath the largest tree in the grove, looking at the stars. The constellations drift above, like stories waiting to be told. Somewhere between the trees, fireflies begin to rise, blinking gently in the darkness, like misplaced punctuation in the sentence of night. They move slowly, aimlessly, and completely content to be misunderstood. One hovers near Caesar's shoulder, then moves on. Even insects respect boundaries out here. You wonder what thoughts drift through his mind as he walks among these trees. Does he recall the smell of the forum stones after rain? The sound of Senate sandals shuffling across marble? Or perhaps something simpler, a vineyard in his youth, a voice that once called his name softly in a dialect no one speaks anymore. It is in quiet moments like this, beneath these trees and this moon, that a man's mind returns to places long left behind. A light breeze picks up again, rustling your tunic and the leaves overhead. You pull the fabric closer, not out of cold, but out of instinct. Caesar has begun to walk back now, returning along the curve of the grove, his steps as measured as his words. He does not rush. He never has. Even his victories arrived, like well-written sentences, inevitable, precise, quietly powerful. You rise from the bench and follow the same path. The stones beneath your feet are cool and uneven, worn smooth by years of feet and thought. Each olive tree you pass carries the weight of centuries. You wonder how many soldiers have walked among them, how many decisions were made beneath their branches, how many emperors paused here to remember they were once boys. Some historians still debate whether these evening walks were strategic or sentimental, whether Caesar counted the trees like plans or wandered them like poems. But under the soft light of this night, you don't feel the need to decide. Not everything has to be explained. Some things are just meant to be walked through. As you near the edge of the grove again, the camp comes back into view. Lanterns flicker like low stars clinging to the earth. The canvas tents rest quietly, their seams tugging slightly in the wind. The olive trees stand behind you now, but not forgotten. They will still be there tomorrow night, and the night after that, listening, swaying, quietly laughing at the humans who think they own time. And somewhere among them, a general will walk again alone, thinking and unhurried, while the world waits gently for his next sentence. Back inside the tent, the lamp flickers low and steady, casting an amber glow across the folds of Caesar's cloak as he returns from the olive grove. His steps are soft but certain, the quiet rhythm of someone who has learned to think while moving. He brushes a few stray leaves from his shoulder and moves toward the wide wooden table. It waits for him like a trusted confidant, every dent and burn on its surface a footnote to earlier nights just like this. Laid out across, it is a vast map of Gaul, creased at the corners, its parchment worn thin in places from so many fingers tracing so many roads. The ink has faded at the edges, like memories softening with time, but the lines still hold. Rivers curl like veins. Mountain ranges stretch like the ridges of an old hand. Towns are marked with tiny, deliberate circles, each one the site of decisions now folded into history. One corner of the map curls upward persistently, despite the small iron weight meant to hold it down. You suspect it's just being difficult on principle. Caesar leans forward, resting his hands on either side of the map. His fingers are stained with ink, the dark smudges running along the ridges and creases like miniature topographies of their own. These aren't the hands of a man removed from his work. These are working hands quietly meticulous, often contemplative and always aware of where they've been. A small cloth lies nearby, already darkened with blotches from attempts to clean the ink. Judging by its current state, the cloth has mostly given up. The general picks up a stylus and begins sketching onto a wax tablet beside the map. His lines are swift but controlled outlines of hills, notes on elevation, approximations of distance between supply routes. Every so often, he pauses and taps the stylus against his lip, thinking. His gaze narrows, not with frustration, but with focused calm. You get the sense he's not looking at the map, but through it, seeing the movements of men, the flow of time, the possible futures, curled inside the terrain. A breeze lifts the corner of the map again. The iron weight slides a little, then stays. The general sighs, adjusts it, and mutters something you can't hear. You imagine it's not particularly Roman, but definitely deserved. If maps had personalities, this one would be that stubborn friend who insists on giving directions even after you've clearly arrived. Candles in the corners of the tent cast faint shadows along the edges of the parchment, making the terrain ripple gently as if the hills themselves were breathing. Caesar reaches for a second map beneath the first, this one older, fraying, and drawn by another hand. The ink is browner, the script less legible, the notes in a dialect he likely had to learn from someone long dead. He lays it beside the current one, the two maps overlapping like a conversation between different centuries. There is a certain reverence in the way he handles these tools. No pomp, no ceremony, just care. The kind you show a book you've read too many times, but can to put away. He compares the old borders with the new, tracing lines slowly with the tip of his finger. He doesn't need to do this. The men outside wait for orders, not archaeology. But Caesar doesn't just conquer lands, he studies them, learns from them. On the far side of the table, sits a roll of blank parchment. It's untouched, but not forgotten. Eventually, it too will hold decisions. It waits patiently, like a fresh snow field before the first step. Caesar glances at it, then returns to his wax tablet, adding a series of notations in crisp Latin. His script is neat, spare, and slightly slanted. It gives the impression that even his handwriting leans forward, always moving toward something. The night deepens, and the corners of the tent darken with it. As sounds of the camp are muffled, now occasional murmurs. A low snore from someone too tired to finish a story. The metallic jingle of a belt dropped carelessly beside a cot. But here, at the map table, the world remains suspended in quiet purpose. He picks up a compass and carefully measures the distance between 2 points near Alesia. The instrument clicks softly as he adjusts the arms. One leg rests over a faintly drawn ridge. The other pierces a small dot that marks a supply depot. He nods faintly, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. A solution has taken shape. A sentence has found its ending. Some historians still argue whether Caesar's greatest strength was his military strategy or his ability to foresee the psychology of his enemies. Whether the lines he drew on these maps were battle plans or stories about how people behave when cornered. But in the gentle glow of this tent, it's clear, for Caesar, strategy was just another language. And maps were the pages. The fire crackles gently in a nearby brazier, casting dancing light across the ink-stained folds of the map. The scent of warm parchment, wax, and olive oil fills the air, familiar, grounding, like the scent of a room that's always been waiting for you. Caesar sets the compass down and leans back for a moment. He flexes his fingers and reaches for the cloth again, and attempts perhaps more out of politeness than hope to clean the ink from his hands. The stains remain. Of course they do. History always leaves a mark. You step back slightly, giving him space. He doesn't notice, but you sense the shift. This is a private moment inside a public life, a pause in the storm, a breath between decisions. The maps lie before him, vast and fragile, full of ghosts and possibilities. The ink has dried, the lines are set, but the story hasn't ended. He leans forward once more, draws a final line from one ridge to another, and underlines it. It's a small mark, quiet, but it hums with certainty. You know what's coming. He does too. But for now, the maps are enough. And somewhere outside, that stubborn corner curls again, just to prove a point. The narrow steps to the Watchtower rise in a slow spiral, each one smooth from years of sandals and weather. You place your hand on the cool stone wall as you ascend, the surface solid but slightly uneven, carved more by time than by tools. The tower stands just outside the main camp, built on a small rise that grants it a quiet authority over the surrounding plains. It doesn't loom. It simply watches, patiently. As you reach the top, the wind greets you again, cooler now, touched with the damp breath of midnight. The platform is open on all sides, ringed by a low wooden railing, worn gray by sun and rain. It creaks gently as Caesar steps forward, both hands resting lightly on the edge. His cloak flutters slightly behind him, caught by the wind like a banner that prefers silence to ceremony. The view from here stretches in all directions. To the east, the Gallic hills roll gently beneath a rising mist, each one a soft curve in the earth's long sigh. To the west, a river glimmers in the moonlight, winding like a ribbon someone loosely folded and left on the grass. You can see the lights of distant villages, faint and scattered, like someone dropped a handful of stars just beyond the horizon. Caesar doesn't speak. He stands still, his eyes moving slowly over the landscape, pausing on distant shadows and familiar turns in the land. This isn't the gaze of a man plotting, it's the gaze of someone listening. Listening to the contours of the land, to the quiet movements of a world that was here long before him and will remain long after. His hands rest easily on the railing. No tension. No gripping. Just the easy weight of presence. Below the tower, the camp glows gently. Each tent is a soft square of amber light, breathing with the rhythm of 1,000 quiet routines. Soldiers lie on their cots, wrapped in blankets and half-formed dreams. Some stay awake, whispering stories or memories, the kind that only surface when the night feels thick enough to hold them. A lone guard passes by on patrol, his torch casting long shadows across the packed earth. He hums to himself, tuneless, gentle, and entirely off-key. You appreciate the confidence. Above, the sky is wide and open, stars scattered like sand on dark velvet. The constellations are clear tonight, old patterns that Romans and Gauls alike have traced for generations. Caesar tilts his head slightly to the right, perhaps picking out a familiar figure, a hunter, a lion, a chariot drawn by fire. Or maybe he's just admiring how nothing up there ever rushes. You step to the far side of the platform. The wind brushes past you again, filled with the scent of pine, ash, and distant water. You breathe in slowly, letting it fill your chest, and exhale into the open dark. It feels like something is being exchanged, your breath for its calm. Fair trade, really. Caesar turns slightly and rests one elbow on the railing, the fabric of his cloak shifting with the movement. His expression is unreadable in the half-light, not stern, not soft, simply thoughtful. He blinks slowly, like someone savoring a conversation that hasn't quite started yet. You imagine he's had this same view dozens of times before, and yet he returns to it, like one returns to a familiar passage in a well-worn book, not for answers, but for balance. The horizon glows faintly now, not from the sun, but from memory. Light reflects off the river and dances on the edges of the nearby hills. A bird calls once in the distance, a long rising note that fades into the breeze. Then silence again, the kind of silence that carries weight, but not burden. From this height, the land looks still. But you know it isn't. Somewhere out there, people are moving. Traders crossing narrow paths, families gathering around quiet hearths, Gallic scouts watching from forests of black pine. The world continues, slow and wide. But up here, it feels held in a single moment. Caesar closes his eyes for a brief second, just long enough to gather something. When he opens them again, there is a subtle shift in his posture, like someone who has remembered something important, but in a hurry to say it out loud. He traces the air in front of him with one finger, drawing an invisible shape, a river bend, a wall, a memory. Then his hand drops back to the railing. Some historians still debate whether Caesar's nightly climbs to the Watchtower were for strategy or serenity, whether he used these views to chart the future or to quietly step outside it. One theory even claims he used them to rehearse speeches to the stars, though if that's true, the stars have yet to vote. Regardless, it's clear that this place holds meaning for him, even if only as a place where the noise falls away. The night deepens, soft and slow. Around the encampment, lights flicker out one by one, tents fall into darkness. Fires are gently smothered, and the quiet murmur of voices fades like mist into the cooling air. Silence settles not as an absence, but as a presence of its own, a hush with weight, a hush that listens. Up here on the ridge, the air still stirs. The wind threads through the branches of trees below, turning leaves with the care of a reader flipping through a well-worn book. The railing beside you creaks again, not loudly, but enough to remind you that time is moving, even if slowly. You lean forward, mirroring Caesar's posture. His hands are clasped behind his back, but there's no tension in them now. Just thought, reflection. You stand side by side, not as general and subordinate, but as two quiet observers of the same still world. Before you, the land stretches wide and soft under the stars. Not conquered, not resisting, simply existing. The sky remains unchanged, ancient and precise. The stars do not blink or sway. They shine as they always have, cool and polite, watching without judgment. Then Caesar turns. His cloak lifts slightly in the wind, a soft final gesture before he descends the wooden steps. You follow, not quickly, not dutifully, but with a kind of quiet grace, a calm shared. The moment stays not in ink, not in stone, but somewhere more fragile, more lasting, somewhere that only silence knows. The morning arrives not with trumpets, but with the quiet certainty of dew. It drapes itself over the Gallic hills like a linen sheet left to dry soft, pale, and nearly translucent in the rising sun. The earth smells of stone and clover, and the cool dampness underfoot is thick with promise. Somewhere down in the valley, a bird clears its throat with an officious chirp, as if to confirm that yes, the world is still turning. You walk slowly along a gentle ridge east of the camp, where the grass grows in thick tufts between scattered limestone. The path here isn't marked. It simply is pressed into place by habit, boots, and the occasional stubborn goat. Below, the Gallic plains stretch out in wide strokes of gold and green. A thin layer of mist clings low to the ground, retreating inch by inch as the sun warms its edges. Caesar is already here. He stands a few steps ahead, his hands clasped behind his back, not in stiffness, but in ease. His cloak has been left behind this morning, traded for a plain woolen tunic that still bears the faint folds of being folded too long. A single breeze lifts them, then lets it go. His sandals are dusty, his hair still damp from a quick wash at a basin. He looks, for lack of a better word, ordinary. Not in presence, but in simplicity. Like a man untethered from empire, just for a few minutes. He glances sideways and offers a brief nod. That's all. No greeting, no words, just acknowledgement. The kind shared between people who know that words would only dilute the quiet. You stop beside him. From this ridge, the landscape looks unhurried. A pair of oxen trudge along a distant trail, pulling a creaking cart behind them. The driver walks in silence, his head down, the rhythm of his steps matching the sway of the wheels. A thin column of smoke rises from a village far to the south, breakfast being made, probably, or maybe just someone boiling water to wake up the cold. Nearer to the camp, a young soldier sits cross-legged outside his tent, mending a sandal with what appears to be thread and unreasonable optimism. A soft snort of laughter escapes Caesar. You glance at him, and he gives a small shrug. He'll be limping by noon, he murmurs, dry as parchment. You smile. The sun climbs higher. Light spills across the hills in slow golden ribbons, illuminating the tops of trees before creeping downward to the roots. A nearby cluster of olive trees shimmers in the breeze, their silver-green leaves catching the light like coins at the bottom of a fountain. The sound of distant birdsong is broken only by the occasional bark of a dog, far down the slope, insistent about something that probably doesn't matter. Caesar exhales softly through his nose and sits on a large flat stone, the kind that seems like it was placed there specifically for thinking. You do the same. The stone is cool beneath you, worn smooth by sun and wind and generations of backsides. For a few moments, neither of you speaks. There is something grounding about this place. No walls, no scrolls, no maps begging to be argued with. Just breath and hills and the slow, inevitable arrival of day. Caesar reaches into a small satchel at his side and pulls out a palm-sized tablet. Not for writing, reading. The wax is already marked notes from an earlier day, possibly copied from a letter or treatise. He flips it idly, reading one line, then another, then closing it again. He doesn't need it right now. Sometimes the words outside are better. A bee drifts past your shoulder, makes an unenthusiastic circle around Caesar's knee, and decides it has more pressing appointments. The general watches it go, then says, without looking at you, they always find their way. It's unclear if he's talking about bees, soldiers, or something else entirely. You don't ask. The morning is too whole to dissect. Far down the hill, the camp is beginning to stir. Fires are relit. Bread is warmed. Water is hauled in sloshing buckets from the well. Orders will come soon. Messengers will jog to and fro with wax tablets and sleepy expressions. Horses will stamp impatiently at being awake before they'd like. But none of that has quite reached here yet. Up on the ridge, time is suspended, not stopped, just gently resting. You glance at Caesar again. His eyes are focused somewhere just beyond the horizon, not scanning, not calculating, simply being. If there is weight on his shoulders, it isn't visible right now. You wonder for a moment if this is the part of command that few see, the waiting, the listening, the ability to sit with a landscape long enough that it begins to speak back. Eventually, he stands, smoothly, without urgency. He brushes a bit of dust from the hem of his tunic, then looks out one last time before turning toward the path back down. You follow, slowly. The grass parts easily beneath your steps. The stone stays behind, sun-warmed now, waiting for someone else. As you descend, the mist has all but disappeared, pulled into the sky or folded into the folds of the hills. The first smells of morning bread reach your nose barley, maybe a hint of honey. A child laughs somewhere near the camp's edge. The moment is fading, but not lost. It clings to you lightly, like a scent caught in your tunic, or the rhythm of walking beside someone who never had to tell you where to go. And when Caesar speaks again just once, just lightly, it's not to command or to instruct, but simply to say, tomorrow will be warmer. And somehow you believe him. The sound arrives before the rider does. It is soft at first, like the tapping of a spoon against a clay bowl, echoing across the damp earth. You stand near the edge of camp, where the grass grows tall and unruly, brushing against your calves like the whisper of silk curtains in an open window. The morning is still pale with light, the horizon holding on to a faint violet hue. You hear it again, the gentle rhythm of hoofbeats, unhurried and deliberate, as though the rider has traveled not through war, but through a long dream he doesn't want to wake from. The rider emerges slowly over a low ridge, his silhouette framed by the soft gold light beginning to spill across the hills. He is wrapped in a travel cloak dusted with road powder, and at his side a small leather satchel swings with each step of the horse. You watch as he leans forward slightly, whispering something into the animal's ear. The horse seems to understand and slows even further, hooves pressing delicately into the moist soil like a baker kneading soft dough. When he reaches the camp's perimeter, no horns sound, no sentries call out. This isn't a time for declarations. Instead, a centurion walks calmly to meet him, offers a quiet nod, and receives the satchel as if it were a newborn bird fragile and potentially full of song. The rider dismounts, stretches with a low grunt, then is offered a piece of warm barley bread wrapped in cloth. He eats it slowly, standing in place. You get the sense that most of his meals in recent weeks were taken while moving. Inside the satchel, Caesar's aides find a letter sealed in dark wax, marked with a symbol not seen since the early days of the campaign. It's a report from the scouts stationed north of Alesia. The Gallic stronghold has begun calling in all neighboring tribes. Supplies are being hoarded. Vercingetorix, the Gallic chieftain with hair like wildfire and eyes always narrowed toward Rome, is preparing for a siege. The message is clear and brief, but its implications stretch like shadows at sunset. Caesar reads the letter aloud to no one in particular, pacing beside the small fire outside his tent. His voice remains level, soft enough that it blends with the wind, but his stride reveals an energy held under deliberate control. He looks out toward the hills, where the shadows grow shorter with the rising sun. Somewhere out there, beyond the hills, beyond the fields and quiet villages, men are digging trenches not unlike his own. You walk beside him as he moves back into the tent, the flap brushing aside with a sigh. The interior is neat, almost austere, but not cold. A thin blanket lies folded over a low bench. A stylus rests beside a wax board already half written, the Latin characters sloping with calm precision. Caesar adds to it not a record of the message, but a new series of thoughts, short directives written in a tone more like poetry than command. One sentence simply reads, "Silence is our strongest ally." Outside, the camp moves slowly. Legionaries stir porridge over small flames. A man oils his sandals. Another gently shaves a companion's head with a bronze blade. The air smells of smoke and crushed bay leaves. Despite the urgency suggested by the letter, no one rushes. This is a Roman army, trained not just in combat, but in cadence. Even preparation has a rhythm here, as slow and inevitable as a tide. The rider, now sitting cross-legged by the fire, takes out a second letter, this one meant not for Caesar, but for a soldier named Lucius. It's a piece of home wrapped in string, with a faded drawing of a dog on the back. Lucius receives it with a grin so wide it breaks the calm. He reads the letter in silence, then folds it carefully, twice, and places it over his heart. His armor catches the morning light like a mirror, briefly tilted toward the gods. Nearby, a historian traveling with the army, more scribe than soldier, scribbles notes in a leather-bound book. His fingers are stained with ink and honey, having dipped his pen into the wrong pot earlier by mistake. The error made his breakfast taste like papyrus, but he shrugged it off. "Some truths are bitter," he muttered. "Might as well be breakfast." He continues writing, recording the message, the atmosphere, the way the rider's horse snorted 3 times before resting. One of the more curious details hidden in that letter was a mention of terrain shifts. The hills outside Alesia are not just high, they are narrow, almost vein-like, and curl in ways that would make traditional formation nearly impossible. According to local rumor, one of the hills even hums faintly during storms, like an old harp left in the wind. The scouts included a sketch drawn in charcoal simple lines on parchment, but it gives Caesar pause. You watch as he studies it closely, his brows drawn, not in worry, but in that peculiar focus of a man who sees not just what is, but what could be built from it. His finger traces a bend in the river, then moves toward a small cluster of dots labeled Timber Source. He doesn't speak, but his eyes have already begun calculating. Around him, silence gathers not as absence, but as potential. Somewhere in the background, a sparrow lands on a helmet left on a post. It hops twice, inspects a smudge, and takes off again without ceremony. The rhythm of the camp returns to its soft home. The letter has done its work. It has passed knowledge from one mind to another, across miles and mists, with no weapon but words and wax. A soldier sharpens a stake for the outer defenses. Nearby, a soldier repairs a sandal strap, threading a bone-handled needle through worn leather with steady hands. The fire beside him crackles softly, casting slow-moving shadows across the canvas walls. From within the tent, Caesar emerges once more. The night air greets him like an old companion. He folds the letter carefully measured, precise, and places it with the others inside a clay jar, sealed not just to preserve parchment, but intention. As he does, he murmurs something about tides and walls, half thought, half memory. No one answers, but an aide nearby nods faintly, as if the phrase were an echo from childhood, or something heard once in passing and never forgotten. These are the moments when history doesn't roar, but hums quietly in the background. Like a stone in your pocket, not cumbersome, but always there. Debates continue over whether that letter from Alesia was penned with urgency or calm certainty. But the truth is, it arrived. That's what mattered. Carried by a rider whose hoofbeats were soft enough to let the world sleep, yet strong enough to change it. And yes, the horse was rewarded with a full apple and a grateful pat on the head. Some things are timeless. The library tent doesn't look like much from the outside. It's smaller than the command tents, less carefully maintained than the infirmary, and it leans slightly to one side, as if perpetually deep in thought. The ropes are uneven. One corner of the canvas is always trying to lift in the wind, like it's hoping for a moment alone with the stars. You pass by it often, without thinking most do. To the average legionary, it is simply the place where Caesar's scribes gather to argue about verbs and get ink on their tunics. But this morning, something draws you toward it. Maybe it's the breeze cool, laced with the scent of old parchment and olive oil. Maybe it's the way the rising sun filters through the thin canvas, casting shifting words in golden silhouette. Or maybe it's the quiet. Inside, the tent feels cooler than outside, the air scented faintly of beeswax, dried herbs, and the slow decay of paper. Scrolls are stacked in rough columns, none of them labeled, but somehow always found when needed. Wooden boards hang from makeshift shelves. A bundle of styluses lies tied in ribbon, half chewed at the ends. Clay ink pots line a small shelf like sleeping birds. The tent walls are layered with papyrus fragments pinned in no particular order, some covered in military inventories, others in philosophy, a few in half-finished love poems with ink stains that look suspiciously like someone leaned on them while eating. Two scribes sit hunched over a shared tablet near the back. Their robes are wrinkled, their sandals mismatched, and one has clearly forgotten he's wearing his belt as a headband. They're whispering, of course, though no one ever told them they had to. It's simply the mood of the place words feel like they should arrive softly here, as if louder voices might wake the ideas sleeping in the scrolls. You walk slowly, careful not to knock over a leaning tower of documents labeled only in shorthand. One column leans so precariously it has been given a name, Gaius the Wobbler, and everyone instinctively steps around it like a sleeping dog. In the corner, a small brazier gives off the scent of sage and something sharper, perhaps juniper. The smoke spirals upward and seems to pause mid-air, unsure if it should keep rising or settle back down. A young woman, possibly a local from Massilia, judging by the accent, sits near the entrance with a cracked slate across her knees. She's not copying anything official. Instead, she appears to be drawing. A sketch of a soldier mid-yawn, helmet tipped back. Another of Caesar's profile, exaggerated slightly, his nose longer, the furrow in his brow more dramatic. You smile, and she shrugs as if to say, someone has to be honest. At the center of the tent, covered in candle drips and ink smudges, sits a long wooden table with 7 chairs, and only 2 that match. This is where the real whispering happens. You've heard the phrase Caesar's Shadow Council, but this is no council, just a rotating group of thinkers, readers, and chroniclers who debate everything from bridge engineering to Virgil's early drafts. Today, they're murmuring about river routes through Gaul, their fingers tracing lines over a brittle parchment map that crinkles like dry leaves when touched. One of them, a bearded man with spectacles pushed far too high on his forehead, insists the river bends twice where it only bends once. Another, clearly sleep-deprived, argues back by citing a travel poem no one has ever heard of. They stop briefly when you step near, then continue at a lower register, as if your presence has reminded them that sound carries. A set of notes lies open near the edge of the table. You recognize Caesar's handwriting, immediately precise, sharp, economical. No loops, no wasted ink. The words are Latin, of course, but the rhythm of the lines has a certain softness to it. Not poetry, exactly, but the kind of language that wants to be listened to. One margin note reads simply, "Truth is what remains when pride and fear have gone." You hear a soft chuckle from one of the scribes. He's found a passage from an earlier draft of Commentarii de Bello Gallico, in which Caesar described a battle as chaotic, like dogs let loose in a bakery. It never made the final version, but they all agree it was one of his better metaphors. They copy it down anyway, for the unofficial collection, the shadow scrolls, as they call them, full of abandoned lines and inside jokes. Apparently, there's one scroll devoted entirely to metaphors Caesar didn't use, but probably thought about. One begins, "A skirmish bloomed like spilled wine." Another ends, "As quiet as a senator with no audience." Outside, the wind picks up slightly, lifting the corner of the tent. The light shifts. Shadows move across the scrolls like slow-moving clouds. You step back toward the entrance, brushing your fingers along the edge of a shelf. The wood is smooth with use, worn down by years of hands reaching for stories, measurements, myths. One shelf contains scrolls entirely in Greek, another in local dialects of the conquered tribes. Some of the oldest texts have no language at all, just symbols, diagrams, and sketches of tools no one has used in centuries. Someone sneezes. A scribe drops his pen. The whole tent flinches for a heartbeat, and then laughter rolls through like a ripple. Not loud, but honest. You hear someone say, "We'll blame the dust," and someone else adds, "The gods favor a sneeze before a discovery." Before leaving, you glance back. The tent doesn't seem so crooked anymore, just thoughtful, contemplative, like a mind leaning in to listen more closely. In a war camp built of repetition and muscle, this place is quiet rebellion made of paper, of language, of the soft scratch of styluses moving in concert with breath. The whispers here are not secrets. They are offerings. And as the flap closes behind you, you catch one final murmur from the bearded man with the spectacles. If this page survives 100 years, it won't be because we were loud. It'll be because we were right. You stand on a soft ridge of grass and morning dew. Below you, the earth of Gaul exhales mist into the low valleys, the fog curling like gentle scrollwork around the hills. The light is still gray-blue, not yet full day, and the world feels like it's paused mid-thought. And there, across the stretch of quiet land Alesia, it rises like an old memory out of the folds of stone and earth. The walls aren't tall in a modern sense, but they carry weight. They encircle the city like an ancient bracelet, not to protect, but to define. This is a place, a stubborn place, a place not yet willing to surrender. The towers of Alesia catch no sun-only mist. They are shapes in the haze, as if drawn in, charcoal and left out in the rain. There are no banners fluttering, no horns sounding, no calls from watchmen. But still, something about it feels alive. You're not alone. Caesar stands nearby, hands clasped behind his back, the edge of his cloak dancing slightly with the hilltop breeze. He's not watching the city, not exactly. He's watching what surrounds it. The curves of terrain, the folds of defense and escape, the watercourses that might nourish or hinder. He's watching as one does when they are memorizing something, to draw later. Behind you, the Roman encampment breathes softly quiet footsteps, muted voices, the clink of iron against belt hooks. The soldiers are up, but not in formation. They move with calm, not rush, preparations, not assault. You take a step forward. The grass underfoot is damp, but firm. Below, the rivers that flank Alesia, the Ouse and the Osirene glint faintly through. The fog, they loop and divide, guarding the city like sleepy serpents. No wonder Vercingetorix chose this place to make his stand. Defensible, elevated, nearly surrounded by nature's walls. You remember a passage from Caesar's own writings. He admired natural fortresses. He had used them often in Spain and Africa. And yet now, someone uses it against him. Perhaps that's why he says nothing. He studies the horizon with that same stillness he once gave to ancient scrolls in Alexandria. His expression is not cruel, not dismissive. It is attentive, as though he's listening to a voice only he can hear. The voice of terrain, the voice of inevitability. Alesia, from this distance, seems neither grand nor weak. It is something else entirely, resolved. You can sense the thousands within it, families gathered beneath rooftops. Fires low, meals quiet, voices hushed. Children being told stories to mask fear. Warriors sharpening blades they may never get to use. And Vercingetorix, somewhere near the center, pacing. Not many know this, but Vercingetorix had already tried surrender months before, not to the Romans, but to his own people. He had offered to step down when the early battles faltered. They refused. They saw in him something more than strategy. They saw a belief dot, and so he remains within Alesia, not hiding, not pleading, waiting. A gentle breeze shifts the fog for a moment, revealing the full outline of the city. It's oddly shaped longer east to west, cramped north to south. There are old Gallic temples there, you've heard. Altars built before Rome was even a whisper. This city is not just a place. It's an heirloom. Caesar finally speaks, not loudly, just enough for you to hear, we won't take it by force. He doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. You've already seen the surveyors, the ropes, the wooden stakes marked with colored wax. This won't be a siege of fire and catapult. This will be a ring, a soft one at first, then tighter, then inescapable. Historians still argue over how many men Caesar brought to Alesia. Some say 50,000, others more than 70,000, but none question the effect. It wasn't numbers that trapped Alesia. It was certainty, the kind of certainty that comes from silence. You sit down now, knees bent at the ridge's edge. The grass is cool against your hands. Somewhere behind, someone is boiling water for morning. Lentils. You catch the scent herbs, garlic, smoke. Simple, ramang. Mortal. A few birds take flight from the trees, below scattering into the morning air like ink droplets across parchment. Perhaps they feel it first, the stillness that isn't peace, the quiet that isn't calm. Something approaches, but not with noise. Not yet. You look back at Alesia. The city remains unchanged. No banners wave, no horns sound, no movement stirs along its walls. And yet, it feels as though the entire place is awake, watching from behind stone and mist. Watching you, watching Rome. Some scholars later wrote that Caesar did not see Alesia as just a military target, but as something deeper, a symbol. A final hinge, ready to close the door on independent Gaul. Others believed he feared this city more than he ever let on. Not because of its defenses, but because of what it meant. A last stand, a people refusing to be erased. But here, in this hushed morning light, none of that matters. Because right now, Alesia is beautiful. Beautiful in its resistance. In the way its towers dissolve into fog, yet hold their shape. And how its silence presses into the valley like the weight of memory. Its stones weathered, imperfect, still stand, still refuse to fall. Maybe Caesar sees that too, not just an obstacle, but a truth to be faced, not forced. There is a rhythm. To conquest, he once wrote, a kind of music, you can't rush it. Only conduct it carefully. Soon, the engineers will begin their work. Measurements taken, trenches planned. The great circle of Rome will slowly tighten around Alesia, one stake, one tower at a time. But not yet. For now, you remain. You let the breeze graze your face, and you listen not for sound, but for stillness. Alesia stands quietly before you, not conquered, not erased, but suspended. A name drifting gently through the morning mist, carried like breath on the wind. And somewhere below, behind its worn walls and silent watch, Vercingetorix waits steady, unseen, and utterly certain that the world is about to change. The morning begins without ceremony. No horns, no cries, just the soft hush of men walking on damp grass and the distant rustle of leaves. Alesia lies ahead, nestled high on its plateau, as if pretending not to notice the quiet procession slowly curving around it. There is no smoke yet, no movement on the walls. The town, like the legions below, seems to be watching, waiting for the first breath of something that has not yet begun. You walk past the lines, where men in tunics pace out distances with knotted ropes. Each stake in the ground is placed with care. A trench will begin here. A tower will rise there. Caesar's orders are precise, but the work is calm. This is not a rush of war. It is the planting of intention. The Romans are not just preparing to fight. They are preparing to surround. To enclose, to contain Dot from a nearby hill, Caesar observes the scene with narrowed eyes and folded arms. He does not speak often. His gestures are brief, a nod to approve, a raised brow to correct. But everyone senses the mind at work behind that stillness. He is not building fortifications. He is shaping inevitability. The siege to him is not a wall, it's a circle, one that tightens only when ready. Down in the valley, carts creak under the weight of timber. Oxen huff in rhythm with the soldiers who unload beams for the first barricades. These are not warriors today. They are carpenters, engineers, surveyors, laying down the bones of something vast. The earth gives easily to their tools. The trenches grow deeper, the piles of dirt higher. Soon they'll form adjumants that rise to shield, to control. A centurion runs his hand along the line of a ditch and quietly nods. Everything here is measured. The depth of the trench, the distance between palisades, the arc of the wall. These are not choices of war. They are the mathematics of dominance. Nothing screams. Nothing rushes. The siege grows like a drawing done in chalk, line by line, curved by the hand of someone who knows the ending already. Here and there, men pause to drink from leather flasks. A few share dried figs, murmuring jokes in Latin too soft to carry. Far, a young tribune, no older than 20, reads from a wax tablet. 400 paces for the inner wall, 800 for the second line. His voice is steady, his eyes scanning the hill, already imagining a fortress within the landscape. His task is not to destroy Alesia. His task is to erase its options. Breeze carries the scent of freshly turned soil. Thorny branches are dragged into position, sippy, small wooden traps hidden in the grass. They will not win a battle, but they might delay it. A soldier nearby chuckles. The Gauls will think the forest itself has turned against them. His partner doesn't answer. He's too focused, carving sharp edges into a length of timber that will become a vallum, a Roman defensive wall. Compact and brutal in its simplicity. By afternoon, the shape of the encirclement is visible even from the hills. Alesia rests in its center, unaware or pretending to be. The Romans now move with a rhythm. Every tower that rises mirrors the last. Every ditch follows the same arc. From above, it would look like a great wheel being built around the town. Its spokes not yet drawn, but its rim nearly closed. Caesar walks the perimeter just before dusk. His scribes follow behind, etching his brief commands into wax. Narrower trench on the south ridge, he says. Wider ramp on the western slope. The carts are lagging, shift them east. He does not shout. He does not repeat himself. The orders are absorbed, relayed, and executed like muscle memory. This is a general who has done this before. And everyone knows it. As the sun drops lower, the glow along the horizon turns golden. The towers cast long shadows across the half-finished walls. Campfires begin to smoke in the background. Legionaries eat, seated on overturned shields, bread in hand, grease on their fingers. They do not speak of battle. They speak of home, of sleep, of women they hope are waiting. The siege, for now, is not urgent, but it is present. And it is growing. The wind picks up as night falls. The tents along the ridge ripple gently like sails at anchor. In the distance, Alesia remains silent still, no fires, no scouts, no movement. But surely they are watching. Surely they see what's forming around them. Surely they know the circle has begun. And surely, deep in the heart of their fort, they are wondering, how long until it closes? Inside Caesar's command tent, a single lantern flickers softly, casting long, quiet shadows against the canvas walls. The general sits alone at his wooden desk, hunched not over a map of Alesia, but over an older scroll one filled with worn ink and remembered names. These are not tactical diagrams, but reflections, notes from the Helvetii campaign, quick observations on the Nervi, fragments of strategy, patterns of movement, and the telling pauses between battles. Caesar reads not to admire his past victories, but to revisit them with care. He studies what worked, what failed, what almost did. The strength of Rome, he believes, lies not in unyielding force, but in its discipline, its ability to listen, learn, and adapt. Outside, the night deepens. Soldiers settle beside small fires, their armor stacked neatly nearby. Some bend over whetstones, sharpening the edges of tools and blades. Others write in wax with styluses, quietly drafting letters to mothers, wives, or forgotten lovers. The scent of pine wood smoke drifts across the hillside, mingling with the earthy chill of freshly turned soil. The trenches lie ready, carved and still. The towers rise slowly, like skeletons waiting for flesh. And all around, encircle the deliberate, methodical ring of Roman intent, draws tighter with every hour, not with shouting, not with chaos, but with patience, with certainty, with the quiet confidence of a storm not yet arrived, but already promised. Morning rises quietly over the Gallic countryside. There is no fanfare, no sudden call to arms, just a heavy mist that clings low to the fields, rolling slowly across the trenches dug in the night. In this muted dawn, the legions of Rome stir not, with chaos, but with a practiced rhythm. A rhythm of earth being lifted, of wooden stakes being driven into place, of quiet voices passing orders from mouth to ear. All around the hill fortress of Alesia, the land begins to change. It no longer belongs to wild grass and scattered stones. It bends now to geometry, to symmetry, to purpose. The first trenches stretch outward in a wide arc, calculated by surveyors and marked with red cords in the dirt. Soldiers move in teams, digging in shifts, the soil rising in neat piles beside them. This is only the inner ring one, part of a larger plan, already alive in Caesar's mind. Behind the trenches, others lay down timber. Long beams stripped of bark are raised into palisades, and the first outlines of watchtowers take shape. Each piece fits into a larger rhythm. Dig, lift, align, hammer. By midday, smoke curls from small campfires, where soldiers take short meals and rub sore arms. Then they return to the work, not with resentment, but with resolve. This is the Ramo. Weigh not glory in the charge, but strength in preparation. The numbers, once laid bare, speak to something monumental. The inner circumvallation, the ring facing the city, is designed to stretch over 14 kilometers. The outer line, guarding against Gallic reinforcements, extends even further, over 21 kilometers in total. Between these two rings, Rome will build traps, pits, ditches, and towers. Every detail is designed not to kill immediately, but to control, to channel. To contain. At one outpost, soldiers unroll rope and mark out a section of what will become a moat. Others build chevaux de frise wooden, obstacles bristling with sharpened stakes to be buried just beneath the soil's surface. Nearby, legionaries carry bundles of sharpened branches, ready to plant them in concealed trenches that will break the legs of charging cavalry. Nothing is left to improvisation. The land is being shaped with intent. Caesar walks the lines, silent for long stretches. He stops now and then to confer with engineers, pointing to elevations, correcting angles, tracing lines in the dirt with the butt of his staff. His cloak brushes against damp grass. He doesn't speak of conquest. He speaks of time, of position, of alignment. To him, this isn't just a siege, it's architecture. Strategy in wood and earth, out at the heart of it all, lies a principle. They circle, not merely a shape, but a message. It does not rush. It does not falter. It surrounds slowly, surely, until no path remains open. The Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix watches from inside Alesia, peering out over the hills from behind his walls. He can see the movement, the slow advance, the fences rising like ribs from the soil. He knows what is coming. But for now, he watches. In silence, as the sun arcs higher, the perimeter grows. Camps are built at intervals, forming a great necklace of tents and towers. Messengers move between them on horseback, hooves muffled by soft earth. Fires are kindled for cooking, but they are small, discreet. Every motion is purposeful. No unit lingers. No tool is idle. And yet, in all this motion, there is calm when night falls. The torches come alive. Along the line, flames flicker against palisades, casting long shadows into the fields. From a distance, the whole circle can be seen points of light forming. A boundary as precise as a drawn map. No shouting, no trumpet, just the low hum of Roman breath and the sound of wood settling into place. The Gallic countryside, once open and wild, now echoes with quiet construction. Trees have been felled, shaped, hauled. Soil has been lifted, compacted, measured. Everything bends to Caesar's plan. Even nature cannot resist this slow momentum. And yet, this is not cruelty. There is no fire set to houses, no slaughter in the fields. Rome builds not out of hatred, but out of intention. The walls do not rise in anger. They rise in understanding. This is the strategy of patience. Caesar's officers speak in low voices as they walk from section to section. They do not issue commands with flair, but with precision. The men respond without complaint. Even the auxiliaries, drawn from distant provinces, work in steady time. This is what binds the army together, not just Caesar's charisma, but a shared belief in discipline. A belief that structure triumphs where passion fails. By the third day, the entire system begins to connect. Camps are linked by gravel roads, allowing messages and supplies to flow seamlessly. Each tower is staffed. In shifts, its torches watched carefully to avoid drawing too much attention from inside the city. Piles of spears, ballista bolts, and backup provisions are distributed evenly, stored in covered pits to keep them dry. There are few casualties. A few accidents, splinters, a twisted ankle, a dropped timber, but no battles. Not yet. The Gallic warriors inside Alesia watch the circle grow, knowing every hour brings it closer to being unbreakable. Some may feel pride, others dread, but none can pretend the siege will fade. Perhaps that was Caesar's true intention all along, not merely to crush, but to contain. To let the act of surrounding speak louder than any sword. The circle was never just a military maneuver. It was a message, a demonstration of inevitability. Because once the lines are drawn and the loop is closed, it does not open again, not without surrender. On the fourth evening, the last palisade rises. The final trench is quietly filled with water. And just like that, the ring is made whole. From the heavens, it would resemble a bracelet tightening around the wrist of a sleeping giant, not with violence, but with certainty. Rome has not attacked. Rome has concluded. And as night descends, and the watchfires blink to life beneath the wide Gallic sky, even the land seems to fall still, as if the very earth holds its breath, suspended in the fragile stillness before the inevitable storm arrives. In the cool hours before dawn, the Roman camp is a constellation of soft lights. Fires burn low, crackling gently beneath iron pots. A few soldiers stir from their tents, their breath visible in the morning chill. There's no shouting, no urgency, just a quiet rhythm of men preparing for something not yet here. Beneath a canvas awning, a centurion checks the inventory scroll. Barley sacks, olive oil, salted pork, lentils, every entry noted in firm, precise Latin. He dips the stylus again, marking supplies with a kind of reverence, as though even grain deserves acknowledgement before it's boiled into the day's porridge dot nearby. Two engineers hunch over a rough wooden model of the siege lines. They speak little. A gesture toward the palisade. A nod. One shifts the twig, representing a tower. Their minds build faster than their hands. The circle around Alesia must hold, but it must also breathe ventilation, support paths, fallback trenches. The geometry of war is silent and exact. Further down the hill, mules are being fed. A young soldier hums as he tosses dried hay into a trough. He names each beast under his breath, not real names, just nicknames. Senator for the lazy one. Mars for the one that kicks. It's a small act of softness in a world designed for stone and steel. Armor is polished not for parade, but preservation. A line of soldiers crouches near the forge tent, rubbing oil into leather straps, sharpening edges with slow, practiced strokes. Not one of them expects glory. They do this so they can move when called, so the shield will hold when it matters, so the blade won't fail. The mess tent smells faintly of garlic and warm wine. A cook ladles lentil stew into bowls, setting each one out like offerings. Soldiers come in shifts, their steps soft on the trampled grass. They speak in murmurs, voices lowered not out of fear, but respect. The quiet is part of the preparation. Scribe sits cross-legged by the edge of the command tent, copying down orders onto a fresh wax tablet. His hands are fast, but his face calm. Every message sent to a legionary cohort, every logistics update, every schedule. This is how a campaign stays alive before swords ever cross. Beyond the main camp, the outer trenches are being reinforced. Earth moved slowly, stakes replaced. Where rot has softened the tips, no one rushes. It's all done with the certainty of routine. These preparations are not dramatic. They are meticulous. That is their power. Caesar walks alone for a time between rows of tents. His cloak trails. Faintly behind him, the edge catching stray grass. He doesn't speak, just observes. His gaze touches a group of men mending boots, another sharing dried figs and quiet jokes, a centurion adjusting a helmet strap for a younger soldier. These are the moments empires hinge upon, though few will remember them. Inside the field armory, bolts are counted, spare shields stacked. Metal clinks softly, like wind chimes in a forgotten courtyard. Wax-sealed crates bear the stamps of distant cities, Massilia, Ariminum, Rome. It is a reminder. The war may be here, but the machine that feeds it is vast and humming behind the scenes. A healer boils linen bandages beside a small fire. Herbs, marjoram, rosemary, crushed mint float in the steaming pot. She arranges her tools with care. Bronze tweezers, wax salve, clean cloth. Even now, she prepares for pain not yet delivered. Because when it comes, it must be met with stillness. The towers, half built, rise like skeletal trees at the edge of the perimeter. Builders climb and descend without speaking, passing buckets of nails, beams, planks. Each action has a rhythm. Step, lift, hammer. The sound is light, deliberate. No one yells. The siege breathes through wood before it bites through stone. Letters are being written. Some on thin parchment, others scratched into tablets. They speak of vineyards and wives, of sons learning to fish, of the way the Tiber shines at dusk. These letters will travel further than swords ever will. They're sent not to inform, but to hold something human in hand, while the world shifts around them. In the corner of the camp, a group of Gaulish auxiliaries sits apart, quietly repairing slings and arrowheads. One sings softly in his native tongue. The tune rises like mist. A nearby Roman stops to listen, doesn't interrupt, just nods and walks on. Even here, among strangers, the air allows for dignity. A gust of wind lifts the canvas flap of the watch tent. Inside, maps are weighted down with stones, lines drawn in ink still drying. A commander leans in, eyes scanning routes, elevations, water sources. He mutters measurements, not to anyone in particular, but to himself, to the work. The sun begins. Its slow climb. Shadows stretch long across the gravel paths. Still no horns sound. No orders barked. Just the continuation of what began days ago. The quiet building of inevitability. This siege is not forged in fire, but in repetition, in ordered footsteps. In food stirred, tools repaired, gates checked, shields set to dry. It is in these gestures, repeated 1,000-fold, that the will of an empire makes itself known. There will be no grand speech this morning, no rousing cry from the command tent, no fluttering of banners against a crimson sky. Caesar has learned that silence, when chosen, can be louder than any declaration. He knows the weight of quiet, the kind that settles not from hesitation, but from clarity. The calm before the storm is not a void, but a decision. A shape formed carefully, like a pot before it hardens in the fire. And so, the camp stirs not with urgency, but with practiced rhythm. Soldiers rise, stretch, gather their tools. A scribe re-inks his stylus. A mule handler checks the lashings on the carts. A cook stokes the embers for the day's first meal. All move with purpose, not performance. There is no fear here, no panic, just readiness, because war does not live in the clash of swords alone, nor only in the cries of triumph or surrender. It lives in the days before, in repetition, in preparation, in the 1,000 small acts that hold an army upright before the first arrow flies. It lives here in this stillness, in this breath before the tide, in the calm, unwavering intentions of those who know what must come. The morning sky is pale and silent. No horns, no banners, no sudden rush of orders. Just the steady breathing of thousands of men, standing behind earthworks that have taken weeks to shape. Caesar rises early, as always, and walks the narrow path between watchtowers, his cloak brushing against dew-wet grass. His thoughts are calm, yet taut like a bow drawn. Waiting for the moment to release. Below, Alesia remains still. Its walls, sharp against the morning mist, seem carved from an older time. From a distance, it doesn't look like a fortress preparing to fight, but a monument refusing to fall. There are no signs of surrender, no attempts to break through the Roman line, only silence. A silence so deep it feels deliberate, as if the city itself is holding its breath. The circle has been drawn. Rome has completed its masterpiece of strategy, an inner ring trapping the city and an outer ring defending against any rescue force. Earth, wood, sweat, and geometry. Every trench, tower, and palisade tells the same story. There is no way out. Vercingetorix, trapped within, surely knows this. But he has not yielded. That, too, says something. Caesar walks past a group of soldiers boiling water. Their voices are low, movements deliberate. No nervous energy, only routine. These men are tired but steady. They have built more than fortifications here. They have built resolve. They know the siege will end, but not when, and not without sacrifice. A runner arrives with word. Scouts have spotted dust on the horizon. Possibly the relief force, possibly not. Caesar nods, but gives no immediate order. There is no reason to rush. He knows the enemy will come. What? matters is how Rome receives them. He turns back toward his tent, toward maps, toward decisions that cannot be undone. Inside, the air smells of ink and leather. Scrolls lie open across the wooden table, notes on Gaulish formations, cavalry behaviors, tribal alliances. Caesar adds a line, then pauses. It is not the number of soldiers that weighs most heavily on him, but the rhythm of the moment, the tempo of history. Strike too soon, and the spell breaks. Wait too long, and the spell may break anyway. Back on the ramparts, a centurion adjusts his armor and peers. Out at Alesia, the city still does not move, but there is tension, an invisible thread stretched tight between watcher and watched. Everyone knows this can't last. The longer silence holds, the more unbearable it becomes. Like thunder that refuses to fall. Then, toward the southern hills, movement. A distant shimmer of spears. Rome watches without flinching. Caesar joins them, eyes narrowing but face calm. The Gauls are coming. Not in full yet, but they will. His mind shifts gears, not into panic, but into readiness. Not into noise, but into purpose. Orders are given, but softly. Units rotate into place. Archers move to their stations. Signal fires are prepared, unlit, and still no attack. Not yet. This is the moment that will be remembered, the hush before the clash. The hour when history itself, for a heartbeat, stood completely still. Down in the Roman lines, a young soldier ties the last knot in a defensive net. His fingers move from memory, not fear. Nearby, an older veteran sharpens a spearhead against. Stone, sparks flicker, vanish. Neither man speaks. They have nothing new to say. Their work says enough. And still, the sky holds. Not yet storm. Not yet fire. Just the weight of inevitability pressing softly on all things. In the tent of Vercingetorix, one might imagine a similar silence. A man who has resisted the empire, who has unified tribes, now waits with his people surrounded. What does he think? Perhaps of honor, perhaps of time, or perhaps, like Caesar, he simply listens to the rhythm of what must come next. The sun begins to sink. Shadows stretch across the valley. The two armies still do not move, not fully. Small adjustments, glances. Birds startled by nothing at all. The world feels like it's balancing on a pin. Not in chaos, but in potential. The potential of collapse, or the potential of surrender. Finally, a horn sounds not a battle cry, but a call to readiness. The Romans do not cheer. They do not charge. They simply brace, quietly, together. It is a beautiful kind of discipline, not rigid, but alive. A kind of strength that does not need to shout to be understood. Night descends slowly over the Gallic plain, folding itself across tents and trenches. Like a soft shroud. One by one, the Roman campfires awaken, their small flames flickering gently in the hush. From the outermost ditch to the innermost palisade, Rome settles into breath-deep, steady, and watchful. It is not the breath of sleep, nor of weariness, but of quiet, coiled patience. The kind a hunter takes before the final move. The vast. Siege works, weeks in the making, no longer feel like mere fortifications. They feel alive, an immense body wrapped around Alesia, muscle and mind unified. Rome has not built a weapon. It has become one. And like a beast in tall grass, it does not roar. It waits, not to destroy, but to hold, to squeeze without striking. And perhaps that is Caesar's true brilliance, not in how he breaks his enemies, but how he makes them realize they are already broken out above. Stars prick through the dark, countless and cold. They look down not on chaos or carnage, but on a stillness more absolute than noise. Alesia's last stand does not scream. It holds its breath. A rider returns under cover of dusk, his horse lathered with sweat. The relief force has camped within. Sight, the final act begins. Caesar reads the message by the light of a single oil lamp. Then, without a word, he sets it aside. No alarms, no calls to arms. The battle will not be won tonight. The work has already been done in trenches, in timbers, in time dot, and as the camp dims and men roll into their cloaks, the world exhales softly, not in peace, but in knowing. The turning point has come, and all that remains is to witness it. The dust has settled not in celebration, but in stillness. The battlefield, once a canvas of chaos, lies quiet. No more cries, no more clash of metal. Only the whisper of wind through abandoned earthworks and the soft steps of soldiers retreating. What was left behind? The camp that once pulsed with readiness now breathes in slower rhythms, the urgency replaced by something else, something softer. The banners of Gaul no longer flutter. The gates of Alesia are open. Swords rest in dirt. Shields lean unused against wagons. Rome has prevailed, but the air holds no triumph. It holds only the weight of what had to be done, and the silence that follows. The siege towers, once proud skeletons of war, are being dismantled with deliberate care. The men who built them now undo them piece by piece, each hammer tap subdued. Not because of fatigue alone, but because destruction leaves echoes that linger in the bones. The victory is complete, but not loud. It does not want to be. Caesar walks among the aftermath, not to proclaim conquest, but to observe. The wounded are noted. Engineers are thanked with a nod. He picks up a Gallic blade, weathered and dull, not to keep, but to remember. Not to glory in defeat, but to feel the cost etched into its surface. Scrolls remain open in the command tent. Ink dries half-used. The maps spread across the table seem distant now, like drawings from a former world. The purpose they held, strategies, troop, placements, walls and trenches, has passed. They are no longer blueprints. They are remnants. Caesar lingers, eyes drawn not to victory, but to pause. There is no rush to send the next order, no eagerness for proclamation, just the quiet recognition that something immense has ended and that something uncertain has begun. Elsewhere in the camp, men write home. Some words are bold, recounting Roman triumph. Others are hesitant, fractured, written by hands that still tremble. Some say little more than "I'm alive." All are honest. All are worthy. The war has marked them, and the ink carries that weight. The fires burn lower than usual. The armor they clean is not for tomorrow's battle. It is an act of rhythm, of memory, of holding on to something familiar after the shape of the world has shifted. Routine is a thread they do not yet wish to let go. The camp is quieter now. The murmurs that remain are subdued, respectful of the silence pressing in. There are no cheers, no chants, no celebration. There is only the sound of the earth exhaling, slow, deep, and tired. A few soldiers gather at the edge of the rise, overlooking. Alesia. No words are exchanged. A canteen is passed hand to hand. Below, the city sleeps. Not proud, not angry, simply still. The fire of resistance has gone out, but its smoke still lingers in the air. One traces lines in the dust with his swords. Tip. Another hums softly. They do not talk of Caesar. They do not talk of conquest. They speak, when they speak at all, of home, of vineyards, of quiet rivers and sunlight on tiled roofs. They are still here, but their hearts begin to travel elsewhere. Engineers sit longer than usual. Tools rest beside them, untouched. Their calculations are finished. The siege is done. For the first time in weeks, they allow themselves to be idle, unsure whether to feel pride or sorrow. They feel both, and neither fully. The mules shift in their sleep. Leather is mended slowly. Blades are sharpened, not urgently, but because it feels strange not to. The camp exists in a pause untimed, fragile, and deeply human. No trumpet breaks it. No messenger stirs it. The pause is allowed to be. Somewhere near the center, the smiths continue to work, but their hammer strikes are measured. They are no longer urgent sounds. They are echoes resonant, methodical, and deliberate. They forge not for conquest, but for continuation. Alesia rests under moonlight. Its walls no longer bristle with defiance. No more torches, no more horns. Just structures that now seem older, more vulnerable. The city has not vanished. It remains. But something inside it has changed forever. In his tent, Caesar finally writes. The lines come slowly, carefully. Not orders, not reports. Just a few. Thoughts captured on parchment. He knows historians will write of this day, of what he achieved. But that is not what he writes about. He writes about the pause. Around him. The night deepens. Campfires dim to embers. The stars remain, watching. Not indifferent, but ancient and removed. They do not care who wins or loses, only that time moves forward. But tonight, even they seem slower. Soldiers sleep without their breastplates. Helmets rest beside bedrolls. Not because they feel invincible, but because for one night they believe they have earned stillness. Not peace, not yet, but stillness. And that is enough. The messengers wait, but no orders are given. Riders stay by their horses. Nothing more needs to be said tonight. The machinery of war has paused. And in that pause, something sacred and human emerges. A breath, a hesitation, a recognition. The cost of Alesia is still being counted. Not in gold or in numbers, but in glances, in silences, in dreams that will come later. The ghosts of resistance linger quietly in the corners of the camp, not in anger, but in memory. The ground is marked with footprints that lead nowhere now. Trenches filled with rain. Discarded spears pressed into the mud. These are the relics not of glory, but of effort. Of moments. Of men who acted before knowing what would be remembered. In the stillness, Caesar leans over the brazier, gently stirring the dying embers. The faint glow flickers against his face, neither proud nor weary, simply present. He does not smile, nor does he frown. The fire offers no warmth, only memory. Around him, the camp sleeps, the silence deeper than exhaustion. He knows now that war's hardest truth is not the clash, but the return. To carry victory without joy, to bear its weight without song. Slowly, he picks up a scroll, finds a corner, and writes with careful hand. Let no one call this moment simple. Then he lets the ink dry. The battle has ended, but night still comes, as it always does. Not with celebration or song, but with a hush that slowly folds over the Roman camp like ash settling after flame. The ground, once thundered upon by boots and blades, now lies. Still, siege engines stand like forgotten statues. The sharp bark of orders has faded, leaving only the quiet. It would be hard to tell, at a glance, that history was written here, that Gaul has fallen, that Vercingetorix, proud and defiant, now sits in silence, surrendered and watched. Along the camp's edge, fires flicker low more for warmth than illumination. Soldiers eat in silence, hunched over simple meals. Some write shakily to loved ones. Others sharpen blades out of habit, not need. War's instruments are not gone, just resting. A mist curls over the hills and tents, softening the hard edges of conflict. Inside, oil lamps cast a warm, golden glow. The tents no longer seem like outposts of war, but drifting lanterns upon a sea of damp earth and fading purpose. In this light, something shifts. The camp is no longer a fortress. It is a breath held between battles. A moment suspended. The camp no longer looks like a battlefield. It resembles a village, a breath exhaled after weeks of tension. A place where men gather not as soldiers, but simply as people. Not to conquer, but to rest. The noise, the grit, the chaos, it all feels distant. Now, like thunder receding across the mountains. What lingers is human. The hum of a song remembered from home. The folding of a letter already read 10 times. The silent gesture of a centurion tracing the curve of his helmet with a calloused thumb. Not thinking of victory, but of quiet. Caesar walks the perimeter slowly, his cloak drawn loosely about his shoulders, the folds trailing slightly in the damp grass. His face is unreadable. He passes the fires, nodding to those who look up. Some stand a little straighter, offering tired salutes. Others simply meet his eyes, acknowledging the man behind the strategy. Caesar says nothing. There is nothing left to say. His words have already shaped the earth here. Tonight, the silence speaks more clearly than commands ever could. He stops at the Watchtower. From this vantage point, the land stretches wide and open, the siege lines now dormant, the trenches still. The field where so much was risked now lies bare. In the distance, Alesia flickers faintly, its walls no longer defiant, but still standing. Somewhere inside, Gallic families gather around their own fires. Children are hushed. Wounds are tended. And in the glow of both Roman and Gallic camps, lit by the same pale moon, something universal is shared. The need to breathe, to sleep, to begin again. The night carries no horns. No sudden alarm. The banners lie limp. The moon watches silently, casting a gentle silver across armor, tools, and tents. It is in this soft light that empire gives way to routine and fear to fatigue. The sentries shift in place, no longer taut with alertness, but steady in duty. Their eyes drift now and then to the stars, more in wonder than vigilance. A runner jogs past, his sandals whispering on the packed earth. He carries no urgent message, no call to arms. Just a scroll marked with requisition lists. Grain, oil, new tunics. The rhythm of Rome continues, but now it hums instead of growls. In one tent, a group of legionaries huddle around a cloth spread with game pieces. Their laughter is soft, barely more than breath, but genuine. For a moment, they are not warriors, but young men again, borrowing a sliver of peace before morning returns. Elsewhere, an officer sits beneath a torch, compiling a report. His quill scratches steadily as he notes the fallen, the injured, the missing. At the end, he writes a single line, the ring held. It is a simple truth, but it contains within it 100,000 efforts, the sweat of engineers, the grit of builders, the sleepless nights of sentries, the discipline of men who waited, dug, and endured. The siege was not won by glorious charge, but by stubborn persistence, by hands that knew their task and did not falter. Above all, the stars drift slowly across the sky. They are quieter now, somehow softer, as if the heavens, too, are tired of watching men pit their wills against one another. The world, so recently torn open by ambition and defiance, begins to feel whole again, not healed, but quieted. The absence of sound is not emptiness, it is permission to stop, to rest, to be something other than what the campaign demanded. This peace is temporary. All those present know it. New orders will come. New lands will beckon. New enemies will rise. The legions will march again. But for this one night, no one asks what comes next. They do not need to. For now, they simply exist within this pause, this narrow window where war does not move forward, and the past has finally been left behind. A few soldiers sit near the edge of the camp, where the land drops into a shallow valley. They pass a canteen, share small stories, and stare into the darkness without fear. A song rises faintly, nothing triumphant, just a tune from home. It fades into the mist, where even the moon feels like it listens. Caesar sits by a low fire, hands resting on his knees. He watches the embers flicker, a thoughtful expression softening the usual sharpness in his gaze. The victory is his, indisputably, yet he does not smile, nor does he mourn. He simply exists in the moment, aware that this quiet, fleeting peace is not weakness, but wisdom. Elsewhere in the camp, tools are hung neatly, armor polished and stacked. Horses nicker softly in their pens. No orders are shouted, no plans drawn. Only soft sounds remain: the brushing of boots, the crack of kindling, the rustle of cloaks. Rome, for all its might, knows when to be still. Above it all, the stars keep their watch, not as judges, nor as guides, but as distant witnesses to a moment suspended between conquest and memory. Let the fires burn low. Let the mist roll in. Let history hold its breath a little longer. Let sleep fall gently, where once there was war. It begins just after midnight. At first, it's so subtle it might be mistaken for a whisper of wind threading through the empty spaces between tents. Barely a sound, a murmur, a breath held by the night itself. Then the first raindrop. Then another, soft, hesitant, as if the sky is still deciding whether to speak. But soon the clouds find their rhythm. Rain begins to fall. It is not a storm, not a downpour, but a gentle, steady curtain, persistent, unbending. It glides across the canvas tents, tracing thin silver lines along ropes and polished wood. The men do not stir. Most are too deep in sleep, their bodies surrendered to exhaustion. A few blink awake, not in alarm, but with the quiet recognition that this sound, this rhythm, belongs to something older than war. Along the Roman roads, winding outward from the tight circle of the siege works, water collects in the grooves between carefully laid stones. It runs along the architecture of the empire. Every gradient, every drain, every precisely angled surface, designed by engineers and carved by the calloused hands of men long before this battle. The rain makes no judgment. It simply follows. The form, it honors the craftsmanship by flowing through it. The roads gleam under the dim touch of the moon, polished as obsidian, vanishing into hills swathed in shadow. Here, rain becomes more than weather. It becomes memory, made liquid. It falls on boots left outside tents, on helmets resting on crates, on scrolls stored in waxed leather pouches, on shields curved, silent, age-worn by time as much as by war. The siege engines sit untouched, their great arms soaked but still. The roar is past. Only the rain remains. This night belongs to no army. It is claimed by no flag, no god, no name, carved into marble. It belongs to stillness, to the long exhale after relentless breath-holding, to a moment carved between violence and its echo, when no orders are given and no alarms sound. Rain has no allegiance. It simply falls. A few sentries remain awake, cloaks drawn tight around their shoulders. They stand atop wooden platforms, heads bowed slightly, not out of reverence, but calm. The sound of rain hitting the sharpened stakes of the palisade is steady, comforting. Behind them, the tents glow faintly from within. Lanterns dim. Shadows dance. Inside, soldiers sleep. And in their dreams, not all carry weapons. Some dream of vineyards, of fig trees, of familiar streets and small homes, of someone waiting. In the command tent, Caesar does not sleep. A small oil lamp flickers beside an open scroll. The air is damp, and the parchment curls slightly at the edges. He does not write tonight. He reads. The words come from an old Greek historian long dead, who once watched the fate of nations turn under silent skies. Caesar's finger traces a line of text, then pauses. Outside, the rain drums softly. there is something humbling in how evenly the rain falls. It touches general and foot soldier alike, wood and skin, bronze and linen, the mighty and the nameless. It reminds both Rome and Gaul that they are, in the end, made of the same earth, shaped beneath the same sky, equal under the falling water dot, across. The outer trenches and the fortified heights of Alesia, the Gallic warriors hear it too. Huddled close under wet cloaks, they listen. Perhaps they wonder if the Romans hear it as they do. Perhaps they remember the last rain before the siege began, when the rivers still flowed freely, when the circle had not yet closed. And for a fleeting moment, the rain becomes something else. Not a gesture of peace, not a surrender, but a bridge, a connection, brief, unspoken, and profoundly human. That both sides, in the quiet and the dark, are simply men. Fire pits hiss as droplets touch embers, releasing tiny spirals of steam into the mist. Tools lie idle, catching the rain in their grooves. The wind softens. The entire world seems to. Slow dot, this is not a pause in time. This is time itself walking more gently dot, and when the first pale light of morning stretches its fingers over the sodden earth, the camp does not leap to life. There are no trumpets, no barked commands, only the shuffle of feet on wet soil, the rustle of damp cloaks being drawn tighter, the waking of men not to battle, but to another day. Caesar steps out into the gray. His cloak darkens under the falling rain, but he doesn't mind. The ground is soft beneath his sandals. He walks slowly along the trenches, between the sleeping tents, saying nothing. Listening dot, he knows what the rain has done. Not merely soaked the earth, but softened something. Deeper, not strategy, not maps, but the soul. The kind of softening that doesn't break, but reminds. Reminds Rome that even steel bends, even triumph tires, and even empire needs to rest its breath. Victory, for all its grandeur, does not erase exhaustion. It lingers in shoulders, in silence, in footsteps that hesitate before duty. The rain has blurred the edges of pride, of power, of the relentless march forward. Even stone, beneath enough quiet persistence, begins to wear down. Soon the siege will resume. The lines will redraw, and the rhythm of war will return like a drumbeat. Shields will lift, horns will call, the machine will wake. But not yet. Not this hour. Not this moment, wrapped in gray, and the hush of wet ground dot today, the world is soft. The roads shimmer like glass. The tents glow like stars pressed low against the grass. The wind carries no command, just the scent of damp soil and wood smoke. The breath between storms. The quiet before the next page of history turns. Let the rain fall. Let the soil drink. Let the weight of ambition pause. Let men walk without orders, without purpose, just for now. Let them be reminded that life is not only made in battle, but in the spaces between. Let history remember this too, that it is not just banners and blood, but silence. The kind that falls without asking. A general standing alone in the mist. No speech, no glory, just breath, just rain. Just this. Let this be what lingers. The night after the rain is clear eerily so. Clouds have all but vanished, and the stars hang sharp and close above the Gallic plains. The air is cool, still touched by the dampness of the earlier storm, but not cold. Just enough to remind. The men they are alive. From his position along the eastern palisade, a young auxiliary named Marcellus looks up. He doesn't know the names of the stars, not like the scholars do, but he knows their patterns. That one there always points toward the mountains. That curve reminds him of his father's orchard in Umbria. There's a comfort in seeing them unchanged, unmoved by the world below dot around him. The camp is quiet. Fires are low, some extinguished. The tension of the siege hasn't lifted, but tonight it breathes a little softer. The earth has absorbed the weight of marching feet and the runoff from the trenches. It smells of soil and ash and something faintly green like crushed pine needles. Inside the command tent, Caesar rests but does not sleep. His cot remains untouched. Instead, he stands near the opening, arms folded, eyes scanning the horizon. From here, he can just make out the faint silhouette of Alesia's ramparts. A dark shape carved against the sky. He isn't thinking about tactics tonight. Not about reinforcements or supply lines. Not even about the enemy. He's thinking about what comes after. What remains when the dust settles and the swords are sheathed. He's won before. He knows the emptiness that can follow. Behind him, a map lies rolled beside a dry ink pot. It has not been updated today. There was nothing new to mark. No line shifted, no ground taken. But perhaps he thinks there is victory in holding still. In resisting the urge to push too soon. In the Gallic stronghold, Vercingetorix too watches the stars. He lies on a flat stone near the edge of the inner. Keep cloak wrapped tight. The rain has left the stones slick, but the sky is open, and that is enough. He listens to the faint creaks of wood and whispers of his warriors. No one speaks much anymore. Not from fear, but preservation. He imagines the Romans down below, with their tidy tents and perfect ditches. He wonders if they watch the same constellations, if any of them see the same shapes he does. He wonders what will be remembered when this ends. Who will write the story, and who will be its silence? The stars above don't care for such questions. They simply burn, indifferent, eternal, but their light falls evenly across both camps, across every shield, every blade, every silent breath. Further out, beyond the inner ring of defenses, the cavalry scouts keep watch. They shift in their saddles, eyes attuned not to the sky, but the distant hills where the relief force still lurks. The stars help them see, but offer no answers. Just clarity. Just patience. A centurion named Servius, older than most and twice as weary, leans against a spear. At the northern trench, he's been in enough campaigns to know when the end nears, not from orders, but from the air, from the way the soldiers move slower, more deliberately, as if rehearsing for the aftermath. He looks up for just a second, thinks of his son Lorne, while he was across the sea, chasing shadows in Britannia. Thinks of the letter folded in his tunic, written on a restless night, then forgotten. Not out of carelessness, but because there was never a moment certain enough to finish it. He tells himself he'll complete it after the siege, after the noise, after he knows which version of himself is returning. Not far from him, two soldiers sit hunched near a post, their voices low and hushed. They don't speak of blood or banners, but of bread, of how the loaves back home were smaller, but somehow sweeter, of olives tough-skinned and salty, crushed beneath a boot or stone, and how nothing in Gaul quite matches the taste. Their words drift upward like steam from a cracked bowl, warm and momentary, meant only for the night. On a small rise near the camp's heart, the engineers gather one last time before sleep. They do not speak of gods or fear, but of angles, moisture, and weight. They glance skyward not for signs, but for rain, for the shift of wind. They measure nightfall as carefully as they measured timber. Even silence has a place in there. Plans, even starlight, must be factored in. Around them, the ring of Rome still gleams faintly. The great wall of ditches, stakes, and earthen ramparts, a full circle of will, held in place not by magic, but by repetition and resolve. In daylight, it speaks of dominance. Tonight, under mist and moon, it seems softer, less a cage, more a line between two stories, one nearly finished, one not yet begun. The wind shifts just before dawn, soft, eastward. It carries with it the mingled sense of both camps. ash, wet cloth, wool, oil, faint wine. There is no boundary in scent. The air folds them together, just for a moment Romans and Gauls, conqueror and conquered, until the distinction vanishes. There are no enemies beneath this sky, just people, just breath, just the soft rhythm of life trying to remember itself. And when Caesar finally steps back from the entrance of his tent, the first streaks of blue break through the dark. He says nothing. There is nothing to command, no speech to give. Just a nod to a passing soldier young, quiet, eyes full of exhaustion. Then he turns, slips back inside. His shadow lingers a moment longer before the canvas falls. The stars begin to fade overhead, slowly, reluctantly, as if they, too, are not ready for what comes next. Morning hovers at the edge of the world, not rushing in, but waiting. It does not announce a new victory. It simply arrives, pale, honest, quiet, and the camp for a moment more remains still. The night is still. Only the faint rustling of parchment breaks the hush. Inside Caesar's command tent, an oil lamp casts its soft golden light over a table strewn with scrolls. These are not orders, nor declarations of triumph. They are memories, notes from campaigns long past, reflections scribbled into the margins of old maps, quiet reminders of rivers crossed, mountains climbed, villages visited, only once, and voices now long silent. He does not read them as a victor. He reads them as a man, listening to the echoes of his choices. Each scroll, each line, holds consequent strategies that worked, alliances that crumbled, and ghost steps of lives absorbed into empire. They do not celebrate. They remember. Outside, the camp sleeps. Shields are stacked in neat rows. Swords are sheathed. The earth, for once, is not being broken, measured, or commanded. It simply holds. The labor of the siege is done for now. The fire of conquest has dimmed, replaced not by regret, but by something quieter, understanding, weariness, a breath before what must come next. One scroll is marked with a single line: victory is not the end. It is the beginning of memory. It is not philosophy. It is truth written by a man who has seen the shape of what victory leaves behind. And so, tonight, Caesar writes again. Not to senators or scribes. Not for his commentary or the annals of Rome. He writes for the ones who will come later, those who will wonder not how Rome won, but how it endured, how it bore the weight of its own expansion, how it remembered. He dips his stylus into ink. The motion is deliberate, unhurried. The scroll unrolls reluctantly, as though it too hesitates to become history. He writes of the siege, not of blood, but of breath, of waiting, of silence, of firelight dancing against iron and stone, of the sound of boots in mud, of frost on leather. He writes of Vercingetorix not merely as enemy, but as reflection, proud, enduring. In another world, Caesar thinks the man might have been a senator, a general. He remembers the moment Vercingetorix stepped from the gates, not with collapse, but calm, draped in red, chin held high. He did not beg. He did not flinch. He simply stood, as one man must before another, knowing the outcome had already been written in the ground. The scroll accepts these thoughts without resistance. Ink moves where once the sword pressed. The stylus scratches softly like the slow footfalls of memory. He writes of how that moment tasted, not of triumph, but of dust and ash and dignity. And of sorrow too, quiet and unspoken. Outside the tent, a breeze stirs the canvas. Somewhere, a mule shifts in its sleep. A guard coughs into the darkness. The world does not pause for reflection. It merely waits. And in that pause, Caesar feels no grandeur, only a sense of presence. He places his hand on the half-finished line, not out of hesitation, but to feel the shape of the moment. He is no longer writing as a general. He is writing as a witness, a recorder of the human part of history, where things break, not only in armies, but in men. The fire burns low, its light reduced to a faint amber pulse across the tent walls. A single drop of wax slips from the lamp's rim, falling soundlessly, hardening on the bronze base like a small relic. Caesar's hand moves slowly across the parchment, the stylus steady. He is not writing of marble statues or golden triumphs, not of monuments or the Senate's applause. He is writing of Rome as it truly is: effort, endurance, repetition. A daily act of choosing clarity over chaos, discipline over ease. Rome, he knows, is not immortal because of its gods or armies. It endures because men, again and again, decide to carry its weight, and that weight is not always glorious. It is often quiet, often lonely. He does not dress his words in grandeur. He does not reach for poetry. He writes plainly, as one might carve a name into wood, not to impress, but to make it last. He preserves, not because the past must be honored, but because forgetting it would be a kind of defeat. One day, he imagines, a boy might unroll this very scroll. He might read it in a villa far from Alesia, where the cicadas hum and the wars are spoken of only in past tense. That boy may pause on a certain line and ask, aloud or in silence, was it worth it? And perhaps no answer will come. But the question, Caesar believes, must remain. It is the question that gives history its meaning. It is the question that binds. Future to past. The ink begins to run thin. The flame in the lamp flickers, drawing long shadows across the canvas walls. Outside, the camp is buried in hush. Only the soft rustle of wind and fabric stirs the stillness. He writes a final sentence, not in command, but in memory, and then stops. He places his palm flat over the page, not in hesitation, but in acknowledgement. The words are now part of the record. The siege, the choices, the cost, they will not vanish into silence. With care, he rolls the parchment. A sound is soft, like distant footsteps. He ties it with worn string and places it beside the others, each scroll a fragment, each one a thread in the long tapestry of empire. Steel may rust, monuments may fall, but words, if kept, can outlive them all. Memory, he has learned, is not the property of victors. It belongs to those who make space for it, who pause, who look back, and in that small, deliberate act, in that soft keeping, Rome breathes. He steps outside, drawing his cloak tighter against the chill. The stars burn overhead, untouched by conquest. Their ancient light falls across tent tops, watchful helmets, stacked shields. They've seen many emperors, many empires, but none riding in the dark like this, on this soil where fire once raged, and fear held sway. A man has chosen to remember, quietly, purposefully. The ink has dried, and that, too, is history. The stars above Rome burn dimmer tonight, veiled by a thin mist that drifts slowly over the rooftops, like the last breath of a long-forgotten fire. The city rests beneath it, not in exhaustion, but in reflection. Far from Gaul, far from fields. Scarred by iron and ambition, Rome listens to its own silence. The echo of past campaigns still stirs faintly in its bones, etched into its stone, soaked into its soil. Rome is not merely a city of marble and statues. It is a living memory, breathing between battles and speaking in the hush that follows applause. It is the torch laid down, not because it has lost its flame, but because there is wisdom in rest. Tonight, there is no roar, no command, only the quiet turning of time through shadow. Near the Palatine Hill, a single window glows with warm light. Behind its arch, in a chamber filled with old scrolls and dust-heavy shelves, a clerk leans over parchment. His reed pen dips again and again into a small bowl of ink. Each word he writes is not his own. They belong to another man who once led legions across mountains and rivers, who once stared down kings and rebels alike. The words are Caesar's, or perhaps they belong to memory itself, to the strange, persistent force that keeps the past breathing even after swords have rusted and banners have frayed. Outside the window, ivy climbs the wall, its green leaves shivering in the night breeze like an audience listening in reverence. Streets beyond are still. Stables are quiet, horses standing half asleep with breath rising gently in the cool air. Statues stand watch, casting pale shadows beneath the moon. Market stalls lie folded in silence, their canvas covers twitching faintly in the wind. Even the fountains murmur more softly tonight that Rome does not sleep easily. It is a city too full of history, too loud with the voices of those who came before. But tonight, it does not resist rest. Tonight, it allows the past to settle gently. Around it like a warm cloak. The generals and senators, the builders and poets tonight, they are all quiet. Their presence felt not in speeches, but in stillness. In a garden near the banks of the Tiber, a boy kneels beside a mosaic laid into the ground. His fingers trace the outlines of distant provinces: Africa, Hispania, Gallia. His eyes widen at the sheer reach of it. He does not understand every name or every border, but one name he knows: Caesar. He has heard the stories, told in marketplaces and whispered by torchlight. He has seen the red cloaks, the statues carved in likeness. Someday, he might read the scrolls for himself. Not just the triumphs, but the reflections. Not the numbers of slain or conquered, but the questions left behind like footprints in wet earth. He might wonder what kind of man Caesar truly was. What kind of Rome he dreamed. What kind of Rome he feared. Above him, the wind shifts, carrying with it distant echoes. The thrum of marching feet, the clash of swords, the slow chant of legions in formation. But softer still, underneath it all, is the breath of a city in repose. A city not forgetting, but holding. Rome remembers not only its victories, but the candlelit questions scrawled in the margins of maps. The generals who wrote instead of commanded. The nights when nothing moved but thought itself. This, too, is part of empire, not conquest, but contemplation. Inside the glowing room, the clerk finishes the line. The ink dries slowly under the lamp's dim flame. He does not read the words aloud. He simply places the scroll beside the others, another thread in a vast and winding tapestry. A record not of power, but of perspective. Elsewhere, in a small chamber of stone, Caesar closes a leather-bound scroll with deliberate care. He does not speak. He does not need to. The candle before him gutters softly, its flame retreating into wax. A single drop falls, hardening on the bronze dish below. Outside, rooftops shift in the breeze. Somewhere, a lone owl cries, a sound ancient and unhurried. It drifts over villas and courtyards, past aqueducts and arches, across a city that has forgotten how to pause, yet now finds itself doing exactly that. The night does not end in ceremony. No trumpet calls, no final decree. It concludes in stillness, the kind that seeps into stones and lingers in the breath. The kind that weighs more than steel and outlasts banners. Let Rome guide you into sleep. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Let the hush of history cradle you. Feel the rhythm not of horses' hooves, but of slow, turning stars. You are no longer in the echo of battle. You walk now in the space between, where silence is not absence, but presence. Where memory is not distant, but close. Beyond the marble and myth, beyond the scrolls and spears, There is a quiet path paved in moonlight. Let your thoughts follow it. Let the drums fade. Let the names sleep. Let the city, vast and enduring, hold you for a while. There is nothing more to pursue tonight. No borders to defend, no enemies to name. The empire breathes beside you, not in glory, but in peace. And above you, the stars keep watch, not as judges, but as witnesses. Let the wind guide you gently. Let the weight of time be a blanket, not a burden. Let the ancient stones murmur soft truths, not orders. You are not called to rise. You are called to rest. Sleep well, traveler. Let go of the torch. Leave the map unmarked. Trust that the road will remain when you wait. Carry with you not just the stories, but the stillness between them. And when you open your eyes again, may the world greet you not with clamor, but with clarity. We will meet again by another fire, under another sky, a gentler one shaped, not by victory, but by memory. Until then, good night from sleepy flames.